Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to Popternative. This, of course, is the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions in the worlds of TV, film, news, pop culture, sports, lifestyle, everything really. Depending on the guest, we talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, my name is PD Beats. My guest is an actor, storyteller, in a lot of really cool TV shows, including The 100, Babysitter Club, most recently Superman Lois, an episode of that. Dylan Kingwell is with us. Dylan, welcome to Popternative, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
I'm excited. I mean, it's one of those things too where, you know, you've had an opportunity already at a young age to work on so many cool shows, and some of them come out in certain times and some of them overlap. In terms of when you're like shooting them, that's different. But when they come out and you see it on social media, is it hard to keep track of them sometimes, like in terms of like promoting and talking about certain ones?
It is, yeah. I think that my messages and stuff are always filled with so many different people, and because I have fans from some of them like every show I've been in, some of them like one, some of them like one and strongly dislike another. It's just it's a whole mixed bag. But I do find sometimes that sometimes one show will be on my mind that I'm working on, but then another thing has come out, so everyone else is thinking of something different than I am. So it can be a little weird.
It's pretty crazy too, because you'll be working on one show that you're on a couple of it's just, I find it funny how you could be on a few episodes of one show and you're not like a lead in it, but the reception, because it's an important character, could just be crazy. Did you kind of know when you started in this, did you realize that, like, wow, I was only in a couple of episodes, but like the fans like are going ballistic? That's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I think I experienced that a lot, particularly with The 100 and The Good Doctor, where those characters, they weren't, as you say, they weren't main characters in the show, but they were, for example, the brother of the main character. And then in that particular storyline in The Good Doctor too, his brother is like, the most important person in the world to him. So yeah, it's a real honor and a privilege to be able to play a role that's so important to the storyline of the main character. And then with The 100, it was Luca, who was just sort of a nice injection of normalcy into Maddie's life. And Maddie was one of the main characters in the show for the last few seasons. So yeah, I think I didn't really realize that. And it was a very pleasant surprise when I've been on these shows and then I see the comments, not just on my account, but, say on the official Good Doctor account, saying nice things about my performance as Steve or about my performance as Luca on The 100. It's a really nice feeling to know that even if just for a few episodes or a few scenes, you can make enough of an impact on someone that they feel that they would like to make a comment.
And to add on that, it's a diverse kind of amount of different genres and different shows you've been working on. The 100 is different than Series of Fortune Events. It's like they're all different, right? Is there a genre that you enjoy working in more than others? Or do you kind of like drama, comedy, horror? Do you like them all kind of equal? Is there one that you really like working with? Because working and watching is different. But what about working for you?
I really recently with my time on The 100, that was for sure the most challenging acting I think I've ever had to do, just because, I don't know if you watch the show, but, my whole family and neighborhood gets massacred, right in front of my eyes. And like, I go into a state of like a catatonic state. I'm not talking, So when I did that show, I really started to fall in love with just like these deeply dramatic scenes and characters, just because that is such a challenge. And I like to be challenged because it feels better at the end of the day when you finish it. But having said that, I'm open to anything. I loved my little stint in horror when I was on The Return like 5 or 6 years ago. I would love to do something like that again. Comedy, I love that. Like I love everything, but I am particularly entranced by these really just deep and like gut-wrenching scenes, because I feel that you have an opportunity to give a performance that just blows people away.
Absolutely. geek culture, comic book culture, nerd culture is massive. It's huge. It's always kind of been there, but it has just exploded in the last 5 years specifically. It is nuts. You had an opportunity recently in an episode of a new CW show for the DC universe, Superman and Lois. You were part of a flashback. You were in that show. What was it like filming that episode, and what has the reception been so far since the show was out, Dylan?
It was so exciting because for me, it was almost a little bit of a blast from the past for me in a way, because I had one summer when I was a little bit younger where I was just so into comic books, and I still, will check in on the recent storylines from time to time. I'm definitely a nerd or geek or whatever you want to call it, but no, it was so great because it just reignited that excitement that I used to feel for superheroes and all that. And then in terms of this show in particular, you could tell that the crew was so excited. The directors, the producers, there was just so much passion and excitement on that set from both sides of the camera, that it was a wonderful experience. And the reception, again, a pleasant surprise, has been fantastic. People, I think in general, liked my appearance. It was pretty short. But it was definitely an important
impactful though.
Yeah, because Superman's father dying is really what sends him on his path.
Absolutely.
At that time, I mean, you could speculate. I'm sure that he would have been Superman anyway, but it's what really starts that at that time for him. So yeah, an important few scenes, and I think that people really like them. I certainly had an amazing time on the set.
I find it very interesting as well because you look at what you've kind of done at a young age so far. You've been on some amazing shows, and you keep going and going. And I find it interesting because I am from Canada like yourself, and I interview a lot of athletes, and I interview a lot of junior hockey players. And I kind of ask them this question, and I'm going to ask you this, right? You're what they call an up and coming kind of storyteller. You're on a lot of shows, you know what I mean? Your career has just started, one can make an argument. Same with a lot of these junior hockey players that they're playing in the junior leagues and they want to play in the NHL, right, Dylan?
Sure.
So there's this different, interesting dynamic though, where the junior hockey players play in these big leagues in the CHL and they're treated like pros. They have a big schedule. They have fans come out to the games and everything. And it's like they're not pros, but they have a pro atmosphere and setting. It's kind of the same with you a little bit, right? But you are also in a position where you're young and you're learning every day. You look up to people in the industry, but at the same time, you've done so many cool things that people kind of look up to you and be like, hey, I want to be an actor like Dylan Kingwell one day. So you're a little bit of a middleman, Dylan. Have you ever thought about that at all? It's an interesting concept.
It is. I like that question. I've never been asked about that before. I think that one of the biggest pleasures of the position that I'm in is having people ask me for advice on how to get into acting. It's my favorite question to receive because what it means is that one way or another, someone has seen my acting, and whether or not they wanted to act before, someone has seen my performance and deemed me as worthy enough to ask for advice.
For sure.
Which is just, it's such a huge compliment, and it makes me feel really great about the work I've done. So yeah, I have thought about that. Maybe not in exactly those words, but I've thought about it separately, as in there are people I for sure look up to, and also acknowledging that there are people that would come to me for advice. So it's a lovely position to be in, because I think having someone to look up to is what keeps people going. Having some goal to achieve, and no matter hopefully I'll go on to have a very long and successful career, but I'll always look up to someone, whether it's an actor or whether it's a musician, because I love music, whether it's a family member who just is inspiring and loving and all that. I'll always have something that I'm going towards, no matter if it's in my career or my life. And I think that everyone needs to have that, because that's what keeps you going.
I think music has, especially like streaming services like Spotify, I think have just like exploded to kind of new heights during the pandemic. Like the amount of music that I've been listening to, and it's crazy because I interview a lot of these bands and they have like millions of streams on Spotify. Like it's insane. What are you listening to these days, Dylan?
It's my taste is actually going out a little bit. I've always been a classic rock fan. And then I started listening to the Beatles a lot a few years ago, and they're sort of like my main, musical
Go to,
inspiration.
yep.
Um, but Creedence Clearwater Revival, another one of my
CCR,
favorites.
yep, classic.
Sadly too short of a career for them. And I'm recently getting into Alex Garfin, who plays one of Superman's sons on the show. He is a fantastic musician. He's got me into a lot of jazz and blues. So I'm branching out a little bit. John Coltrane, stuff like that. I think the pandemic has, because you always hear like, hey, if you got free time, you should pick up an instrument. Well, everyone's had free time for the past year.
Yeah.
Maybe they're getting back a little bit, but I think that I know a lot of people as well who picked up an instrument, and I think it's a great thing because music just it spreads positivity, and it's just really nice vibes, and it's great if there's more of it out there.
One trend I'm noticing, I mean, you've had some roles and your characters have been in shows where there's a lot of scenes that have a lot of dialogue between people, but just in general, Dylan, a big trend that I'm enjoying in watching TV and film is impactful dialogue, because you could see there's a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows that are being written in a way that two people talking and chatting can be so impactful. They could be saying scary things. They could be saying funny things. They could be saying moving things. Have you noticed, because I'm sure, as a storyteller like yourself, you watch a lot of things here and there, and you're kind of keeping up for a lot of new stuff. Have you noticed that dialogue driven content is becoming a lot more relevant and more kind of dynamic these days? Because I'm noticing that that's huge. Two people can have a conversation back and forth, and you're just kind of like startled by their conversation. What do you think about the dialogue driven stuff in scripts these days, Dylan?
That's a brilliant question. I think that part of the reason for that is that when you look at the past year that we've had, there's been so much to say publicly. There's been so many movements to get behind, so many parties to support, whether it's subliminal or whether it's right in your face. And I think that there are probably the reason that maybe you and I'm sure others are noticing that is because people use TV and film, like you say, it's storytelling. And whether it's not a direct part of the plot or not, writers love to incorporate real world events into their show. And I think the Babysitter's Club is a great example of that. Just subtle things like having a gay character that just had like a few scenes in one of the episodes and things like this. I think that it does have a big impact on people, like you say. So as for, like horror and stuff, I don't know. I can't really make a comment on that, but I would say that like definitely there's been so much to talk about. And so writers are definitely taking that opportunity to express themselves through the dialogue of their characters.
What I think though about the horror, because I'm a huge horror movie fan. I love horror movies. So it's like I always kind of bring up things about that naturally because it's a thing that I love. But it's just what's interesting, Dylan, is what I was kind of getting at. You alluded to it, of like there's a lot to say and stuff, is there are new ways to kind of scare people. Like you don't need like the traditional kind of jump scare or gore. Like people are scary, as we have seen.
No kidding. Well, I think, it sort of makes me think about like almost like Shakespeare plays, how the real art of it was the poetry within the dialogue. And I love watching that stuff where the scenery and cinematography is obviously the heart of film and TV, but dialogue between characters is what incites emotion, because an establishing shot of a house, doesn't give you much to go on. Yeah, the house could look scary, but it's what the characters say and what they're doing in that house for this metaphor that really matters. And so, I think that dialogue that affects us is just one of the most amazing things.
For sure, I totally understand what you're saying. It's what the characters say. One last question before we wrap up, Dylan. I mean, what has been so far? You don't have to say who's giving you this advice, but what's the best advice you have been given throughout your kind of career as a storyteller so far? And give us an example, if you can, of how you were able to use that advice someone gave you on a project.
Well, I mean, advice, it's hard to rank because it all builds up, doesn't it? It's like when you're learning math and in grade 8 you learn something and it's not as important to all of math, but you wouldn't have been able to learn the next step. So I think probably the advice that I learned most recently that really impacted just the way that I approach acting, was I was working with a director and I was doing a scene, and it was not so much emotional, but just, it was a little heated. Yep. And I was keeping eye contact with the other actor in the scene, and the director said and came up to me and basically said, when you're having a conversation with someone, how often are you actually looking at their eyes? And I realized, hey, I never even thought about that, because there are a lot of acting classes out there that tell you the opposite, tell you to keep eye contact. But I think mastering just natural line delivery is something that I've really been trying to work on, because I almost think that emotions are easier than natural line delivery, than natural conversation, because it's easy for me and for a lot of actors out there to go to an emotional place, because everyone has things that makes them sad, that makes them angry, and everyone can tap into that. But I think that mimicking normal conversation, even though it's what we spend our days doing, we don't think about it at all, and so it's a difficult thing. And that's why I think that the majority of, maybe if a lot of people have opinions, and if a performance looks corny to someone, I think a lot of that comes from just the natural dialogue doesn't seem natural. And so that's what I've been trying to master. And that tip, and the way that I've been able to apply that is just in following scenes and stuff on this project. I just thought about that, and it's just another tool that'll go into the toolbox of me trying to master the art of natural conversation.
I like that. Toolbox. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dylan's toolbox. That's amazing. Yeah. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on Popternative, man. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, I loved it. You asked some amazing questions. It was a great time.
I really appreciate it. So, Superman Lois is streaming right now, so people could check out your scene of your episode right now, which is awesome.
Yep. Yeah, it's out there. It's open.
Yeah, it's out there. People love that stuff, man. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, they love it. Yeah. They're eating it up on social media, even though, again, there's a few scenes they're loving it.
No, it's incredible, really. I believe there was a memo sent out, and I believe we got 2.4 million viewers, and that was just of the live. Premiere. So I'm sure that's maybe close to doubled or more with streaming views and stuff like that.
Insanity. And where can people follow you on social media to keep up to date with everything?
I'm most active on Instagram, and that's at Dylan.Kingwell.
Amazing. Well, seriously, man, thank you so much for doing this, and congrats so far with your career thus far, because you've done amazing things, and I also wish you all the best for the future as well, man.
Thank you so much. You too. Stay safe. It's a stressful world that we're living in, but just remember, it'll all be over soon. That's what I'm telling myself.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Dylan Kingwell and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.